So you want your MIDI string parts to sound more realistic. You want to breathe life into them, give them some more character. Well, today I've got 3 techniques to help you achieve just that. Hi everyone, my name is Noam. Before we dive into the specific techniques and how to get that amazing string sound, let's try to understand why this is such a challenge. If you think about it, the way the sample libraries are built, they take a bunch of really good musicians, like if we have a violin section, got the 16 violins all playing C. They record the C, they recorded softly, they recorded loudly, they recorded very loudly, they recorded short, they recorded long, they recorded with vibrato. The possibilities are endless, and depending on the library, you get a different amount of recordings that were actually created. And if you think about it, the technology is pretty crazy. When you play on the keyboard, what actually is happening is each one of these different articulations, which is a different file on your hard disk, gets loaded instantaneously almost, and you get this seamless performance from all these tiny bits and pieces of recordings. So now it's much clearer why it's so challenging to make these virtual instruments sound like a real performance. While a real performer is just seamlessly moving between notes and giving all the dynamics and making it louder and softer and everything is very flowing, we have to mimic all this using tons of little files that are stitched together. So with that little introduction out of the way, let's see how we can narrow the gap between the MIDI performance and a real performance. I've created a short musical example so we can see how all of these techniques work in a real life setting. So what's obviously missing in this little piece of music is a melody. And what more fitting than having a dramatic string melody on top of this? I came up with this melody. Let's listen to it with the track. Okay, the melody is okay, but it doesn't sound very realistic. Actually, it sounds a little bit like a church organ if you ask me. The reason for that is that it's very, very flat. That brings us to the first technique that I want to talk about, using MIDI CC automation. We can automate different parameters to make the sound change in character over time. The 3 main MIDI CC automation parameters that we use when programming strings are modulation, expression, and vibrato. Modulation in most VST instruments affects the dynamic layers. Remember we talked about the recording that was made soft and loud? There is a reason for that. It's not just that the volume changes when you play soft or loud, the character and the timbre of the sound changes as well. If, for instance, I'm playing this violin in low dynamic, it sounds quiet, and it's also a bit airy. And if I play it in a high dynamic, it's louder, but it also has a different character. You can actually hear the tension on the string. So when we move this mod wheel, we're actually telling the computer to load different samples that correspond to the correct dynamic layer, basically morphing from the low dynamic layer to the medium and to the high one, or how many dynamic layers that this specific library has. This can give us a lot of realism. The second MIDI CC parameter is expression. Now this basically is a volume knob in most libraries, while modulation was actually giving us different dynamics, like a real player playing softly or loudly. Expression is sort of a fake dynamics. It's just changing the volume. In most cases, you have to check your specific library to make sure about this. Before we go on to the third parameter, let's contrast using modulation versus expression. I'm playing these notes and changing the mod wheel. Sounding like a realistic crescendo and diminuendo. Let's hear how it would sound just playing with the expression. Sounding a little less authentic. The third parameter is vibrato. That is when the player shakes his finger a little bit to get that vibrating sound. Some libraries don't have this, but if you do, this can also help to change the character and give us a much more realistic sound. Let's hear the violins without vibrato. And with vibrato. Without. With. Without. With. Okay, that definitely gives it an added character. So we've got 3 MIDI CCs. CC, by the way, means continuous controller, right? We're controlling the MIDI data sent continuously. These 3 together can give a lot of character to our otherwise lifeless MIDI string performance. Check this out. This is our string melody without any MIDI CC. Now with these continuous controllers, which we have here on the bottom, modulation, vibrato, for some reason it's called breath here because it's on CC2. I don't know if there's a way to change that. Let me know in the comments. And the last one is expression. As you can see here, I have done very little in terms of expression because, as I explained, this is fake dynamics. Sometimes that helps. It gives you an additional dynamic range. But in this case, I didn't feel need to change the expression very much. I mostly automated the modulation. Again, without. And with. Huge difference. Let's see how this difference translates inside our track. No MIDI CC automation. Church organ. And if I put the MIDI automation back, sounding way more realistic. All right, the second technique has to do with what kind of a string patch you are using. Up till now, we've been using an ensemble patch, which means we have the whole string section spread out on our keyboard. If we play the high notes, we're playing the violins. We go down, we get the violas, the cellos, the basses, and that is very useful. But if we want some added realism, a good idea in many cases is to split it out to separate tracks. One track for the violin, one for the viola, one for the cello. You could add in the second violin. What I've actually done here, I've added a solo violin on top of the violin, viola, and cello, which are all in octaves. And what we get is this. Let's contrast that with the ensemble patch. Also sounding pretty good. Frankly, I feel that they're mainly different. I'm not even sure what is better. Let's listen to them in the context of the whole track. Now the ensemble patch. I think maybe the volume in the ensemble patch was a little lower than in the split out parts. It is actually pretty difficult to make an exact comparison because I'm not sure exactly what's going on under the hood with the ensemble patch, how they split the different sections. But what I can say for sure is that when you split it out, you get way more control and you can definitely achieve more realism because in real life, each section would sound a little different. Their dynamics would be, the swells would be a little different. The timings would be a little different. So if you perform 4 different parts you will inevitably get a more realistic sounding part than just using one ensemble patch. So that's all great when we've got these long notes. What about short notes? Well, when we have a short note string part, like an ostinato, we can't usually use these MIDI CCs to automate the sound. What we can do is manipulate the sound using velocity, basically how hard you hit the key on your keyboard. So I have here a string ostinato, first violin part, and we can see the velocity is represented by the color. The more red is the higher velocity. It's also, you can see here on the bottom, the longer bars are higher velocity and the shorter bars are lower velocity. This is just the same as modulation in terms of the dynamic layers. This is not just making it louder. This is loading off the hard disk the strong articulation recording. It sounds very different than the soft articulation, even if both are short. Here's a soft dynamic and a loud dynamic. Let's listen to this ostinato. What we're achieving by changing the velocities here is a musical performance and a human performance, because no human would just play everything the exact same dynamics. Let's listen to how it would sound if I make the dynamics totally flat using the velocity control. A lot more machine-like. Let's listen to it with the changes in velocity again. Much more musical and real sounding. And one last thing that I'd like to add before I end the video is that there is a very big effect of the specific sample library on the amount of control that you can get on the sound. Some simple sound libraries have no vibrato control. Some have no dynamic layers, or only two, or whatever. So while in general, I'm not advocating to get the most expensive gear or expensive sample libraries, there is definitely merit to the idea of getting a not basic string library if you want to get your strings to sound very realistic. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, if you learned something, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, tell your musician friends about it so they can also benefit from this content. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Until next time, goodbye.